First up tonight is Chris C. Chris is an award-winning multidisciplinary artist and writer living in Whitehorse. He has shared the stage with many folks, including Martin Luther King III and Mustafa the Poet, and once came in second at a Poetry Slam World Cup. His work focuses on the intersections of identity and power through storytelling and art, particularly in the role of art in historical and current resistance movements. He is especially interested in exploring the complex convergence of migration, decolonization, and land politics through the rebuilding of pan-racial solidarities, centering Indigenous knowledges. He has one dog and one sourdough starter. Chris.
Great, thanks, Leanne. I have yet to name my sourdough starter. Likely will remain unnamed. How's everyone doing? Okay, good. So, like, one person is alive over here. The rest of you merely are existing, which is what I feel like life at the pandemic has kind of brought us to. If we can even bring ourselves to come to a space and to share space again, that's already a big win. So a lot of gratitude for everyone for showing up tonight. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you couldn't because of that pandemic. Okay, I am really grateful for the opportunity, grateful to Leanne, Dr. Charlie, if you didn't know. For converging this event and this space for all of us. I personally am really excited to be able to speak alongside Leanne Simpson. I read a lot of your work, Leanne, when I was doing my MSW at UVic. Also, I didn't know Glenn Coulthard would be here as well from Dechinta. I also read a lot of his work when I was doing my degree. So it's a great honor, and I hope I am able to exhibit and demonstrate that gratitude through some of my words tonight. So, like Leanne said, I do spoken word poetry. It's really the only thing that I can ever hang my hat on, is that I can say words at varying speeds and sometimes they rhyme. For some reason, people seem to like them, so that's what I'm going to do a little bit of tonight. But on the topic, I was telling my roommate, Annie Hakim, over dinner tonight, that if I were to have chosen by hand a topic on which to speak about, it would be decolonial futures and pan-racial solidarities, because that is what I'm particularly interested in. It's been my research focus, and even in my professional practice working with refugees and in migration, a question that has become increasingly more and more salient to me over time is how do I both hold the work of migration and transnationalism, but also in the work of decolonization, especially in my role as a racialized settler. And I don't think those two things necessarily always reconcile very neatly. So it's a question that I'm always asking myself. So I'm, again, grateful to have the opportunity to unpack some of it here. So I'll just start by reading a little bit from one of my very shitty, oh, am I allowed to swear? One of my less than quality grad school papers. Yes, Social Work 551 with Dr. Billy Allen, who is the reason I made it through that program, and in many ways the reason why I made it through, period. My father loves small town Canada. When I was young, we didn't have much money, but we did have a four-door Oldsmobile and family on the other side of the country. So every July, we'd pack our tent, some dried tofu, and a single Neil Diamond cassette and head up the Coquihalla towards Kamloops and Highway 1. It was about a 7-day trip each way. Dad had limited vacation time, so we moved fast, stopping only for quick bites in small towns at Chinese restaurants, because if there is one thing that the postmodern agenda cannot dissuade me of, is that absolutely there is a Chinese restaurant in every small town in Canada. My dad loves small-town Canada because when he sees the inevitable half-burnt-out sign in bamboo font advertising Lee and Kwok and their Dragon Cafe, he feels like he has made it. To consider what it means for my father, a mostly Asian immigrant, to have made it in so-called Canada is to consider what it means for the son of a mostly Asian immigrant to be studying Indigenous practice and policy in an anti-oppressive social work school. The two are not so dissimilar in that we are both, him and I, trying to find a way to operate against the normative confines of Canadian society, to secure a foothold in the fabric of a system that was never intended for our longevity, and to make sense of what it means for people like us to be here when there were already people here. To take that a step further then, what does it mean for me, with all my research interests and practice experience in refugee settlement and transnational migration, to support the other in being here when the original people here have themselves become another? Put another way, and as Benita Lawrence and Inakshi Dua caution, how do we as others ensure that in carving out space for ourselves in this Canadian national project, we are not perpetuating that same othering onto Indigenous peoples? These are urgent questions for those of us who would seek to act as decolonizing allies in the midst of our own struggles. And I will approach these questions in the stories that follow. Stories that unpack further my identity as a settler of color, the dissonance I hold of being both other and otherer, and the responsibility I have as an ally helper in this work to ensure I continually locate the struggle of my Indigenous relations within my own. After all, as Gangulu activist Lilla Watson reminds, our liberation is bound up together. In first year university, I dressed up as Pocahontas for Halloween. No malice intended. I just wanted to be seen as the guy living in residence who was totally comfortable dressing up as a woman. How progressive of me. Now, we called our residence the Res for short. I dressed up as Pocahontas on the Res. The irony was not lost on me at the time. And time passes. With all those left out lessons from my high school textbooks and university history classes, it was only a matter of time before the lessons caught up to me. Not realizing that 17 years earlier, I'd been C-sectioned onto unceded Coast Salish territory, locking eyes with the waves of the Pacific, in infantile ignorance that this was the very same ocean that my great-great-grandfather first sailed over on. Now, I was raising hell with the red fish up the river. And though at 17 I packed my bags to go east, young man, and never returned, still the memories of that mountain, they float back to me. The smell of the oceans, the sheer shadows of the trees that shaped this boy, it is not lost on me that when I got those mountains, trees, and ocean wave inked into my left arm, I was literally bleeding the West Coast. A coast that was never mine to bleed. That same coast upon which First Nations lived on this nation first for thousands upon thousands of years, cutting sea, weaving cedar, hosting potlatch, carving totem, bending sitka, smoking salmon. That same coast upon which my ancestors first landed in 1788, panning gold, blasting rock, laying track. And while today Asian people make up over a third of Vancouver's population, bringing their families and speaking their languages and running their businesses, I wonder if they know, I wonder if we know how we made it. How we scraped the bottom of the barrel to find only ourselves. Took nothing more than our hard-working attitudes, a little elbow grease, and used it to cook fried rice. And we took that fried rice and sold it to the whites. I wonder if we remember how we first struggled to climb, and then to crawl, and then to stand, and now and only now we're just beginning to run. I wonder if we remember where we came from. How they used to post signs on street corners saying no Chinese or dogs allowed. How we came from the east as cheap labor, toiling over railway tracks for little food and even lesser pay. I wonder if we remember how they used to send Chinamen with frail fingers holding sticks of dynamite into the tunnels to blast their way through the mountains, taking bets on how many of them would come back. I wonder if we remember how we used to spend cold Canadian winter nights shivering in tents while the CPR foremen slept in railway cars and log cabins, and that frostbite turns out to be just as deadly as dynamite, and that so many of us died. And just as many of us survived. I wonder if we remember how we survived. That Indians would come down from the hills, bringing us berries, feeding us dried fish. They would take those of us who were too sick, too skinny, too frozen, too half-dead from dynamite explosions back to the villages and nurse us back to health. That natives, so hated by the whites, would become our friends. Native women became our wives. That they buried us when we died. That there are still graveyards scattered across Turtle Island of Native and Chinese side by side. That our lives are forever intertwined with the descendants of the same, what they call the same Mongoloid tribe. That our lives are forever intertwined. A mixing of two great people, cedar and bamboo, and yet today we struggle still to survive, and I wonder why. In first-year university, I dressed up as Pocahontas for Halloween, not recognizing the pain that comes from appropriating someone else's culture. I was merely following in the time-honored tradition of Cleveland Indian, Atlanta Brave, Washington Redskins, not recognizing that I was merely manifesting years upon years of assimilation, objectification of these abolished originals. Aboriginals unwelcomed on their own lands, think back. Have you ever put your hand over your mouth to make a Geronimo war cry? Ever put on a headdress at a music festival because you're a hipster? Ever worn factory-fabricated moccasins and consider yourself more in tune with the earth? We are all Pocahontases on Halloween, pickpocketing precious parts of other cultures to suit and soothe ourselves, and never realized then, I'm only learning now, how my people have only lasted this long because of the generosity of some Cleveland Indian, Atlanta Brave, Washington Redskins, but less than a lifetime ago, I was trying my damn best to paint with all the colors of the wind. I guess it's true when they say that history is written by the victors. And for all the injustices Asian people have suffered in this country, we cannot deny in many cases. We've won, we've etched our names into history's logbooks, but we've forgotten to write the names of our allies too. Forgotten the way we used to bend cedar and weave bamboo, raising sturdy half-breed children from rock outcrops in British Columbia's Rocky Mountains, mixing powwow drums with Buddhist chants, cooking bannock with chopsticks. Our victory is their victory, so their struggle should be ours to carry too. On June 22nd, 2006, we as a people received reparations. Meanwhile, the original caretakers of this land still live on reservations. And if we have any reservations why we need to protest this devastation, I suggest we begin by going back to cold Canadian winter nights spent laying railroad tracks in the Rocky Mountains. I suggest we begin by going back to the old days and the old ways in which we used to bend cedar and weave bamboo. I suggest I begin by pledging never again to paint this yellow-skinned red face. Because if it weren't for these red-skinned Indian braves, well, I wouldn't be here in the first place. So in my journey of trying to figure out where it is that I fit into all of this, where it is that I fit, period, a book that I was pointed to by my mentor many years ago has kind of retained its centrality for me, and it's maybe some of you know it. It's called Borderlands, La Frontera by Gloria Anzaldúa, who is a luminary, Chicanx, queer, feminist scholar who was one of the first to be doing this type of work in the 80s and publishing this work. And for me, it's no coincidence that a lot of my journey started, or not started, but really got kick-started, I guess, or kicked into overdrive. What are the metaphors? When I started working in the Arizona-Mexico borderlands in migrant advocacy and seeing the land there, which I compare quite frequently to the land up here, the vastness, the beauty, the harshness, and to recognize the borders that are both physical and literal that we see in front of us, and also the borders that exist within ourselves. And Gloria talks a lot about that, about this concept of what does it mean to dismantle and deconstruct these borders within ourselves, especially as people who are mixed in many different ways, right? And so that was kind of part of my recalibration in terms of how I make sense of what this work is. And I think when I consider decolonization and my role in it, and the concept of decolonization is not a metaphor, but how do we work in ways that are literal and also hopeful. The reimagining of things and the consideration of building futures for ourselves, for me, has always started with borders and how do we reimagine what it is to put lines in the sand, to proclaim what's ours and what's not ours. So this is about the border and what it taught me. In the Southwest United States, there is a place. Now, it's this place that exists outside the lines of countless classic country songs, old boys in pickup trucks, and cheerleaders in cowboy boots. Hallelujah, says the preacher on Sundays, to packed congregations. Out here, well, the sun will bake you slow. Dry heat smells sweet of mesquite trees, and prickly pear cactus flaunt their fruit to the bold and or stupid. Here, it is too hot at noon to do anything but sleep or drink Arizona iced tea, but in the night, well, in the night shall you find respite. Cool winds carry coyotes' yips as fireflies dance to imitate endless stars strewn across the sky as if God herself had glow-in-the-dark freckles. The desert pigs scurry. The jackrabbits hurry. As rattlesnakes come out to prey, Border Patrol comes out to play. In this courtroom, I stare at whitewashed walls rising up into sky-high ceilings. You could play basketball in here, I think to myself. But no, we are not here for basketball. We are not here for fun and games. This is not a playhouse, I remind myself. This is a courtroom. This is the house of the law, and we are here to see justice, but I hear them first. Shackled chains connecting hands, feet, arms, legs, dressed the same way they were caught yesterday, dusty, sweaty, bloody clothes. They shuffle in 7 rows. I do the math. 7 rows of 6 folks times couple chains at ankles, elbows, cracked skin, the sun exposed, burnt neck and cheeks and ears and nose, a couple lawyers to depose, add guards to keep them on their toes. The judge says, all rise. And so it goes. See, about 1,800 illegal immigrants cross the U.S. border every day that we know of. They cross the line in Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona, some by river, some by train, but most endure the pain by foot. 9 days through the desert to skirt the wall that looms 10 feet up and cast a shadow as if to say, you are not welcome here. You, the original caretakers of this land, are not welcome here. See, most are Mexicano, Spanish, indigenous, mixed bloody through centuries of genocide and colonization. 566 indigenous nations make up the United States of assimilation from the Nooksack to the Navajo. This land was never ours to begin with. It is borrowed from the earth and the stars, but we draw lines in the sand to proclaim what's ours in this part of the borderlands, where the sun is relentless. People live in the shadows of these huge iron fences. Abuelas fast, attend mass to show their repentance, offer prayers to Guadalupe for her benevolent presence to bless their desperate sons, grandsons, and daughters who still dare to cross these walls and waters. Are you a citizen of the U.S., Mr. Ramos? No. Did you enter the U.S. illegally? See, do you understand the charges being laid against you? See, how do you plead? Culpable. For most, it's over in 30 seconds. 30 seconds for 180 days, but for most, it's not their first time anyway. They will be back. They've done this before. Brave the devil's highway, scorn scorching sun and scorpion, spirits beat but never broken. I have a friend, Baltazar Garcia, who sees this happen every day. A proud Mexica, he lives on the border and waves his papers like a flag for Border Patrol to see, and he tells me, this is not a migration. This is a homecoming. So onward, my people, until the day we finally find our way home. Shameless plug, Dr. Leanne Charlie is also an incredible artist. If you'd like some stickers for your water bottles or your Thule boxes or your skis, I know my audience, this is Whitehorse. You can hit up Dr. Charlie, tons of stickers. So in that reimagining, then, I just wanted to read a passage from Manzaldua here, where she says that it is not enough to stand on the opposite riverbank, shouting questions, challenging patriarchal white conventions. A counterstance locks one into a duel of oppressor and oppressed. Locked in mortal combat, like the cop and the criminal, both are reduced to a common denominator of violence. The counterstance refutes the dominant culture's views and beliefs, and for this it is proudly defiant. All reaction is limited by and dependent on what it is reacting against. Because the counterstance stems from a problem with authority, outer as well as inner, it's a step towards liberation from cultural domination, but it is not a way of life. At some point, on our way to a new consciousness, we will have to leave the opposite bank. The split between the two mortal combatants somehow healed so that we are on both shores at once and at once see through serpent and eagle eyes. Or perhaps we will decide to disengage from the dominant culture, write it off altogether as a lost cause, and cross the border into a wholly new and separate territory. Or we might go another route. The possibilities are numerous once we decide to act and not react. I think that call to action sits heavy these days, as people who look like me are vilified in the mass media as the perpetual other, the foreigner, harbingers, whatever that word is, of virus, disease, and yet our people who have been here for a very, very long time have always been very quiet. And so that is a dissonance that I know me and other members of the Asian diaspora who have grown up in our generation have always kind of wrestled against this. You know, do we not also deserve to have our voice heard? Do we not also deserve to take up space? And something that Dr. Allen told me about is that, you know, you don't always have to speak to be resisting, and to consider how those who came before were also taking up space so that we can now speak. The first time my grandchild asks, and they will, where were you? A history book will unfold before my eyes, brittle spines snapping like a leather belt, some pages still yet unwritten, dripping with the blood, sweat, and tears of our Oriental ancestors who crossed an ocean seeking a dream that turned out to be more like a myth. Where were you? When CPR foremen sent our trembling brethren with frail fingers clutching sticks of dynamite into the tunnels, where were you? When head tax and immigration acts shut the door to the motherland, splitting countless Asian families down the middle like steamed pork buns, where were you? When the boat people landed in the dead of winter, promptly pushed to the ghettos like the rest of the rabble, where were you? When Nikkei fishing boats were impounded, the nets deemed a threat to wartime security, 22,000 Japanese sent to the mountains to concentrate on all the ways they weren't Canadian enough. The first time my grandchild comes to me with puffy eyes, asking me where I was the first time I got called a chink, asking me why it still hurts this bad in the country that says it welcomes us all, I will be forced to contend with all the times I've kept my head down and pulled my bootstraps up. A history of silence that speaks louder than a Hiroshima bomb. See, we've never been a loud people, just hardworking. After all, chopsticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you, so study hard, work hard. We're lucky to be here, to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, take out joints and laundromats to prosperity and graduation caps. They may not love us like they love our food, but they pay our mortgages while we pay our dues. When my grandchild asked, so what did you do? When they knelt on a black man's neck till he died, when they trespassed and attacked First Nations healing camps, when they called it Kung Flu and spit on our grandmas at bus stops, what did you do? And where were you? When Black Canadians paved the way for our emancipation, when local natives pulled our broken bodies from collapsed railroad tunnels and nursed us back to health, weaving cedar and bending bamboo, did you fight for them when they fought for you? I want to tell them, we tried. We stood, we fought, we could. No longer only doctors, lawyers, engineers, but artists, athletes, allies, activists, every Koreatown and Little Manila in active defiance, every stoic action mistaken for silence. Here we are standing on the shoulders of humble giants. Their guidance meant survival so that now we can speak, now we can strive, now we can struggle so that now we can thrive. When they ask me what I did, I want to say, I tried. So thanks for being patient while I ramble on, and I'm just going to say one more piece and then get out of the way and let Leanne come and work her magic. But again, I think one thing I would just like to put out is an invitation for all of us, whether you're racialized, you're Indigenous, or you're white, an invitation to consider what it means to reimagine, an invitation for all of us to reimagine, and to think about, what are these alternative futures? What are these beautiful alternative futures that we can work towards? It doesn't have to be the way it is right now. but it does require reimagining. Another thing that Ansel Tua says very quickly is, nothing happens in the real world unless it first happens in the images in our heads. And so I think now is a time for dreamers to really get to play. I wrote this today. We're going to see how it goes. Yeah, who knows? Yeah. The day they let Colton Bushi's killer go, my professor wept. It is hard to explain, she explained, the depth of pain one feels to be hurt over and over again, like a wound that never heals but scabs and peels and scabs and peels. A week later, I am marching in a rally in downtown Victoria. As 3 women in regalia collapse into a sobbing hug, trudging forward like a 3-legged race, the good-looking couple walking next to me discusses their lunch plans for after. I want to grab them by their Patagonia jackets and tell them that there is a demon in demonstration, but truth be told, I am already thinking of my paper that is due for my Indigenous Perspectives in Practice class. How ironic. To mourn and celebrate in the same weekend. Just days ago, I was clustered on Fisger Street for the Lunar New Year celebrations in Canada's oldest Chinatown. I watched silently and chewed a Tic Tac as a good-looking couple climbed on top of the memorial stone commemorating Chinese head tax survivors in order to get a better view of the parade. A spectacle. When they pulled the bodies of 215 small ones from the soil this spring, I wonder if Earth Mother gave them up willingly or if it was merely the peeling of a scab. These tiny skeletons in Canada's closet whisper loud secrets. They peer up at us through grated sewers. We often like to be scared, but never held accountable. What does it mean to bear witness? My phone autocorrects witness to whiteness, and I laugh, then start to cry. There is a thin line between Colton and Christopher, at least to the eye. A shared history of resistance and guidance, survival and silence, severed and split by lateral violence, made thicker by a trench of our own digging. Drunk natives stumbling through Chinatown, were we all not once relegated to these ghettos with the dogs? When I struggle to form sentences in broken tongue to my family, I am reminded that more than words are lost in translation. We all pay the price of joining this nation. When they ask me about what it's like in Whitehorse, I tell them, I have never met so many well-meaning white people in my life. I tell them it can be lonely to be the only one who looks like me, and yet there are many brown and black faces in town, which begs the question, what spaces am I around? Where do I play? With whom do I break bread? Who is down? I have been told I make content for white people, and though it stings, wasn't that always the goal? Birth to blend in, my traditional name burns in a black hole. My father's clan is Je, anglicized to C. My mother's anglicized to Ing. So I guess I'm finally seeing that Je, is not a curse, but a tattoo. It roots me in this turtle's back to railway tracks and internment camps. When I braid my hair, they tell me my roots are showing. It is a speaking back, a taking up, a note to self and others. Back to friendships of old through the mud and the gold, solidarities ancient and tethered. Perhaps we relearn how to truly bear witness, reimagine this freedom together.
Masicho, Chris, I don't know about all of you, but I felt we should have been clapping or responding in some way. So let's do it again.